Hello and welcome to Business 101 Online. I'm your course instructor, Heather Hines. This is chapter we're going to be talking about Chapter 7, Management and Leadership. So this chapter we're going to be talking about management styles, the 4 functions of management, how to complete a SWOT analysis, and within the 4 functions we have planning, and we're going to be talking about the 4 steps of planning. So we have a lot of material for Chapter 7. Now, good management for a company is extremely essential. In fact, I want to say that it is probably one of the most essential things that a good, successful company has. For example, Sheryl Sandberg, if you haven't heard of this woman, you really should go ahead and Google her and determine who she is. This lady, she used to work for Google, in fact, and then Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg said, hey, you know what, my company, I have the innovation, but I need a good manager. So he brought this lady on, Sheryl, on as his second in command, his COO. And in 2007, he was only making about $150 million, which for Facebook is not that much considering how large the organization is. And then in 2008, he brought her on. By 2011, Facebook was generating $3.7 billion. $3.7 billion in revenue. So it went from $150 million in revenue, that's not profit, that's revenue, to $3.7 billion in revenue. So that's how impactful good management can be. So she steered the company. It had good bones. It had good innovation. It just needed a good leader like Sheryl Sandberg. So let's talk about what is management. Management, if you go and you look it up, there's various definitions. According to our textbook, we are looking at management from an organizational level. So we're saying, hey, management is you need to have 4 skills. You need to be able to plan, organize, lead, and control. And we'll talk about those 4 functions in just a little bit. So management is the process of getting to your goals by planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. There are 3 main levels of management. There's top management. Those are the owners, the CEO. For example, Facebook's top management would be Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg. Then there's middle management. Those are the people who might work at the branch offices. And then there are the supervisory managers. Those are the people that work at the actual sites. Those are the ones that deal face-to-face with employees. And we also often call supervisory management first-line management. Why? Because they're kind of like the first line of defense between the employees and the rest of management. So if an employee is disgruntled, they're going to go and they're going to talk to their supervisor, their first-line manager. So what makes a good manager? Well, today's managers tend to be a little bit younger. For example, we just talked about Sheryl at Facebook. She was 38 when she was brought on with Facebook, which is pretty young for a COO. They're younger, they emphasize team building, and they need to be great communicators. If they cannot communicate their plans to the rest of the managers, then they cannot be successful managers. So communication is a key, and being able to build teams. Because what is a manager doing everything by themselves? That's not a good manager. That's just something that can work really hard on their own, but they cannot grow their business very large unless they can delegate their work and create teams. So let's talk about the 4 functions of management. The 4 functions of management, we talked about this briefly in defining what is management. The 4 functions of management are planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. The 4 functions of management are planning, leading, organizing, and controlling, as we mentioned earlier. Now, planning, these 4 functions are very in-depth. We're going to kind of go over them throughout the next several chapters. For this chapter, Chapter 7, we're going to be talking about mostly planning and leading. Organizing and controlling, we're going to be talking about in Chapters 8, 9, and 11. Now, what is planning? Those are the reaching goals. That's saying, hey, here's our mission, here's our vision, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Leading is, hey, how do we motivate our employees? How do we get them to effectively and efficiently get to the goals that we want them to get to? All right. Organizing is, what kind of structure are we going to have? Are we going to have a flat organization with one manager and several employees, or are we going to have a tall management with lots of different management levels? So that's what it means by structuring organizations. And we're going to be talking more about that in Chapter 8. And that's saying, hey, how are we going to manage our employees? Where are we going to put our employees so that they are effective? Where are we going to put our resources? Remember, resources are things like time, money, their assets. And how are we going to how are we going to assign tasks? Lastly, there's controlling. That's how our employees are measured, how they are monitored, how they are rewarded, and if they are not doing the correct procedures per company policy, how are you going to take corrective action against those employees? So that is what we're going to be covering in chapters 9 and 11 with HR management. Now again, part of the planning is to create a vision and mission statement. Vision and mission statements typically for most companies look pretty familiar, and they're very, overarching, broad. We want to help people. We want to provide the best quality. Generally, they are very broad ideas of where the company wants to go and how they want to do it. So the vision is, where is it trying to go? For example, Costco, their vision is to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. A mission statement is a little bit more technical, meaning they're going to outline a little bit more and talk about, hopefully, their philosophy, their sustainability, and how they're going to help their various stakeholders. So Costco's mission is to continually provide our members with quality goods and services at the lowest possible price. So they're talking about their members, who are one of their stakeholders. And what are they going to do for their members? They're going to provide quality goods and services at low prices. Now remember, part of planning, let's go back to that slide, is to develop strategies to reach the goals, the organizational goals. So in order to reach those goals, you need to have some idea of yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? So you need to sit down and think about your organization. And in order to do that, we typically will conduct what's called a SWOT analysis. Now, a SWOT analysis is something that you are going to be tasked to do in both your discussion this week and in your critical thinking questions numbers 2 and 3. So SWOT analysis, that's looking at your internal strengths and weaknesses. So make sure that you understand that strengths and weaknesses are things that are internal versus your external opportunities and threats. So let's talk about strengths and weaknesses. For example, if we're talking about a company, let's pick a well-known company like Amazon. One of their strengths is to innovate new products. They're continually coming up with new products. They have brand recognition, so they have a strong brand name, and they have a lot of technical expertise in order to create and drive those new products. So strong brand name, and they can innovate new products. What is an internal weakness of Amazon? Well, their size makes them, they are a large company, which kind of is a weakness because it makes the company kind of unwieldy and hard to, for them to change quickly. So for example, they kind of have their hand in a lot of cookie jars. They have lots of product offerings from their grocery store, physical grocery stores, to now they're creating their own Amazon goods. If you look on Amazon, now they're making their own types of batteries. So they're doing vertical integration, which we'll talk about later. And so with all those product offerings, some of them are bound to fail. For example, they had that Fire phone, which failed miserably, lost millions of dollars. In fact, they had to give away those phones because no one wanted them and wanted to buy them. Now, opportunities and threats, those are things that are outside of them. Those are things that they can take a hold of. So those are trends, maybe customer preferences are changing that they can go and look for and take a hold of. So, for example, some opportunities for Amazon might be the green movement. Remember, we talked about in the last in one of the previous chapters, that green jobs are likely to increase from 9 million to 40 million in the next few years. So maybe they can figure out how to capitalize on the green movement. People are starting to trend towards higher quality items. So if they want gourmet meals instead of just the regular fast food dining. So maybe they can take a hold of that. Some threats might be some government regulations. Amazon is trying to get into China and other countries, so they're trying to expand their organization, and with that is always a threat of different government or regulations. Maybe they might be taxed higher in different places, maybe because they don't understand the local tastes and trends. They might build a physical presence there and completely fail. And as always, there's threats from competition. So Walmart is one of their biggest competitions in terms of online sales. They're continually competing against Walmart because both consider themselves low-cost leaders. And maybe from in other aspects, for example, there's the Echo device. Maybe Google is now coming up with their Google Home devices. So lots and lots of threats from all over the place for a company like Amazon. So they definitely would want to complete a SWOT analysis. Now, after a company completes a SWOT analysis, then they might think, okay, this is the direction we want to go. This is how we can best capitalize on our upcoming opportunities. So let's go this direction. For example, maybe Jeff Bezos, as part of his strategic planning, his broad range goals, he might say, you know what? I want to create some physical stores. We have a great online presence, but we do not have a physical presence. So let's get into the grocery business. So that might be the strategic plan. Let's get into the grocery business. It's just a broad plan, nothing very specific. Then, in order to achieve that strategic plan, he might say that to his board of directors or to his managers, and then to achieve that strategic plan, that overarching plan, he might throw that to the next level of managers who will do the tactical planning. So strategic planning is by the high level CEO, and then he throws that to the mid managers who are in charge of tactical planning. Tactical planning is the identification of specific short range objectives by lower level managers. So, for example, those lower level managers are going to say, how can we create grocery stores? Well, let's maybe start with one or two. We are going to create one within the next 2 years. So they're determining the who, what, when, where, and how. So we're going to start in maybe a large city like Seattle. For example, there is a Go grocery store, an Amazon Go grocery store in Seattle. And we're going to create some teams to design this store and develop the store concept and whatnot. Then there's the operational planning and the contingencies planning. So let's delve a little bit into this. So again, we have the strategic planning, which we just talked about, the tactical planning. How are people going to go into the store? Well, they might, as part of the tactical planning, the managers might come up with, hey, let's create an app where you can take what you want, you take your grocery bag, you fill your grocery bags, and then you leave, and it charges you through the app. As part of operation and contingency, maybe the operation planning is where you're actually delving in and getting even more specific. So yes, we need an app. Yes, we we need to build this grocery store in the next 1 to 2 years. But how are we going to do that specifically? Well, that's part of operational planning, where you're creating work standards and schedules. So maybe we're going to hire a company to build these little kiosks. And then there's always contingency planning, where, if this store fails, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep reinvesting money? Are we going to sell the store to a local grocery chain and just, go on to our next venture? What is our contingency? What are we going to do if this isn't as successful as we hope? So again, there's 3 main management levels. You can read about each of the management levels in this slide. What are some skills that managers have? Well, some skills that they have, there are 3 main skills that we're looking for. Those are their technical skills, their ability to perform tasks, their actual knowledge on, maybe you have an engineer that understands how to build a rocket ship. Then you have human relation skills. How well do they communicate and motivate employees or other people around them? And then conceptual skills. How are they at understanding the organizational mission and vision, and aligning what they're doing with the overarching goals of the organization? So conceptual, that's kind of like the broad goals of the company, and how are they able to see that big picture of the company. Now, at different levels of management, you need different types of skills. So top managers, remember, they're in charge of creating the big goals of the organization, so they really need conceptual skills. Middle managers, they need a little bit of everything. And first line managers, those are the ones that interact directly with your employees, so they need more technical skills. So top managers, the emphasis is on conceptual skills. First line managers, the emphasis is on technical skills. Lastly, let's talk about leadership styles. There are 3 types of styles that we're going to be talking about in this lecture. So we just talked about management. Now let's talk about leadership. 3 types of leadership styles are autocratic, participative, and free rein. And this is kind of an order of you're micromanaging people, making all these decisions to, hey, you're giving people, you're empowering your employees, and you're allowing your employees to make the decisions. So autocratic leadership is where you're making all the management decisions without consulting anybody. Participative is where you allow your managers and employees to help you make decisions. And then free rein leadership is where you basically say, hey, employees, I want to create a grocery store. And then your employees take off running and create your grocery store, where you're empowering your employees and you're giving them their overall objective, and you're really just kind of monitoring them, and they're doing all the work, and they're able to make their own decisions. So autocratic to free rein leadership. Now that concludes our lesson on chapter 7. Now don't forget to also read the chapter, maybe complete your extra credit, take your quiz, and complete your critical thinking questions.